there was a small window during that year or the year after where the industry was paying attention to platforms such as ours and was engaging with platforms such as ours. I would say that that window has closed, and I'm not sure if beyond the first year or two, much actual tangible change has really happened beyond the work that platforms such as us have been doing. And I just want to really highlight that the change has come from platforms of the marginalized people who have been doing the work, not the industry. You know, you saw platforms such as B.A.D, you saw platforms such as Daytimers, you saw certain voices such as like Elijah and prominent voices come out and become, I guess, a voice of providing just an alternate perspective on things and providing platforms for other entities. I think that's what's changed, is that the industry has allowed a handful of voices or alternative platforms to come through.
Mixcloud.
The Inside Track.
All right. Welcome back to another episode of The Inside Track. I'm very excited today to be joined by NIKS and Joshua from the Black Artists Database, or B.A.D. And I believe you guys are located in London and in Berlin. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So we have an international representation already. And how are you both doing? How's your week been?
I'm doing pretty fine. Pretty like a busy week. Besides all the standard work, I had my own panel talk on Tuesday, but was really incredible actually. And tomorrow I have my own club night. So it's a busy week, but the sun is out, spring is here. So I cannot complain.
Yeah, similar. Busy week. I was traveling in America recently, so I got back a couple of days ago, and just been working. I also have like club shows coming up, and just been working with some deadlines that we've got. But yeah, the sun is out and it's blue skies, so that definitely alters the mood and makes me more driven, I guess, and inspired to get up each day.
Yeah, it feels like spring is finally here after a long winter. So lifts everybody's moods. Well, I'd love to maybe start out by just hearing the origin story of the Black Artists Database, and maybe a little bit about both of your roles in that origin story, and just hear a little bit about the background for maybe some of the listeners who haven't yet come across it.
Yeah, sure. So I guess, B.A.D, it was born in 2020, so coming up to 5 years in June. It was a group of friends and myself back then, other artists, DJs, producers in the scene between, I guess, Berlin, London, Lisbon at the time. And we were just in a group chat talking about everything that was going on at the time, in terms of what we saw happening in America with George Floyd. And then it led us to think more specifically about the music industry that we're in, and more specifically the kind of underground electronic scene that we were part of, and the changes that could be made there, or more specifically, I guess, what role do we as individuals have in a scene that we, or an ecosystem that we are part of, that we should be more proactive in terms of consideration to Black artists and the impacts on them, and how the underground electronic scene specifically perhaps treats certain artists more unfairly than others. So we decided to create a spreadsheet. It was a Google spreadsheet which just simply listed off artist names and their Bandcamp links, because at the time, and I think still now, Bandcamp, that every first Friday of the month had their Bandcamp Fridays, where they would waive 100% of the fees so that the artists would get 100% of the revenue. So we created the spreadsheet, and we simply started it with artist names and artist Bandcamp link, and we shared it. And then overnight we shared it on our respective socials, and then the next morning we woke up and there was like 700-800 names on the sheet. And so it was just people who had just got access to the sheet, everyday people who just populated the sheet. And then it kind of grew very organically in that regard as the link was being circulated, and it just grew and grew and grew as it was shared widely amongst individuals, publications, platforms. So that year I just messaged a couple of friends who are back and front end developers to ask them if they could develop this into a website that is a bit easier to navigate, and they did. And then it was by that point a couple of thousand names, and it was on an actual website, blackbandcamp.info. And then over the years we've just worked with developers to develop it more into a fully functioning database as it is now. So blackartistdatabase.co, which has 5,000 artists and I think around 1,000 creatives. And you can search by name, location, genre. You can also, there's a really cool random search functionality. And so now it exists as a full database. And then in addition to the resource itself as a kind of freestanding resource, we've provided additional activities. So we've done some production workshops, some masterclasses and general kind of workshops, panels, talks. We've also expanded into events, whether it be our own club events or takeovers. We've also provided resources. So particularly during the pandemic, grants. We were working with some bodies who were giving us resources in terms of grants and links that we'd share with communities, monthly newsletters, and those kind of, I guess, educational but also tangible resources outside of the database itself. And I guess then today we focus mainly on having the standalone website with complementary activities around events, panels and talks, mostly, yeah.
And in terms of kind of the responsibilities or the areas that each of you look after, I think, Joshua, are you working more on the booking side of things? Is that?
Yeah, I joined B.A.D 1.5 years ago. I think half a year before that, NIKS and I were introduced to each other, and we by mutual friend, and we had just beautiful conversations, a lot of reference points, and so that after that, a few months later, NIKS invited me to join B.A.D as the event coordinator. So I'm in charge of running most of the events smoothly, and especially because this year we're celebrating the 5-year anniversary. So there are a lot of events coming up. So there's a lot more work. But in general, the communication with different partners, and also the communication with the artists who are the reach out towards the artists, the communication with the bookers, etc. But also the programming part, the announcement part. So everything when it comes to the events. And as B.A.D, we also do a lot of other events besides like curating a certain club or festival. So also in charge of the several workshops. Last year, for example, during Amsterdam Dance Event, we had a beautiful fundraiser record fair, and together with Resident Advisor, we were coordinating that. Also organized 2 really beautiful panels there. So that's mostly that's most of the part what I'm doing for B.A.D.
Nice. Awesome. And hold a pin in that thought around the 5-year anniversary tour. I want to hear more about that a little bit later on. We'll come back to that. But I wanted to kind of just explore, because originally, obviously, the idea started and the focus was on Bandcamp, which I think most listeners probably have heard of, being primarily a platform where people can purchase and buy and support music and artists out there. And then you evolved over time to kind of be broader than that, encompass other platforms. But I'm just curious, what was it about Bandcamp that drew you there initially? And more broadly, I guess today, how do you think of buying versus streaming in the music industry?
Yeah, I guess with Bandcamp, it was, I guess, a couple of points. So I think, and it still is, the music buying platform that resonates particularly well in the underground electronic scene. Most DJs or producers or kind of listeners and followers are using Bandcamp as their source of discovering music, buying music, sharing music. And that really goes across the board from like your earlier, say, bedroom producers or DJs, right through to your kind of tier 1 producers or DJs. Everyone's sharing music on Bandcamp. So when we started at the time, that was the most obvious platform for us to, I guess, communicate with our DJ audience coming from an underground scene. And also, as mentioned before, that's when they started their Bandcamp Fridays. It was actually in May 2020, and we started in June 2020. So it just made the most sense in terms of how are we able to reimburse, or if in essence, Black artists who have, and this is not, it's not that B.A.D was created as a way as like financial reparations. It was just, how do we ensure that during a time when DJs aren't able to gig and make money in the traditional way through live touring, how can we support Black artists? So yeah, it just, the combination of the two made the most sense. And I think in terms of like buying versus streaming, I mean, the past 5 years has changed a lot because we've seen with a lot of platforms, a lot of platforms are now owned by different superstructures and investors, which has meant that the way that they function has changed, not in benefit of the artists, unfortunately, most of them. So buying platforms, I think for me, are still key because, you're able to directly support artists. Streaming takes years and years and years before an artist receives any sort of financial gratification. Also, I find with, direct buying platforms, there's just one line closer engagement of an artist in terms of like you're able to. I mean, a lot of buying platforms now, you can download the music files straight on them. They have apps where you can do that. You can listen on the go, not in a streaming capacity, but you can engage with the music and the artist a lot more than you used to be 5 years ago. So I'm a, I'm like a big digital or physical buying platform person myself. I recognize the benefits of streaming platforms, and like as an artist myself, I'm active and have accounts on those. But I do think like the more immediate impacts can be seen on buying platforms.
And I'm really curious, if you were kind of in charge of or running Bandcamp today, what do you think are the pieces or bits that are missing about it? What would you kind of build on or modify or improve on in 2025?
I think there are like some functionalities that can be, I mean, they have improved also in the past 5 years. Like, as I mentioned, like 5 years ago, you couldn't download tracks, which you can do now, and you can do it via the app. So there has been a lot of improvement with such platforms. I think there could be some more just with like, just user functionality, quite simple user functionality, just to make the experience a lot more streamlined, I think. But I do think they're doing a great job. And I think that they are probably one of the only few ones that have ticked a lot of the boxes, particularly for users and listeners from the electronic world. But I just think in a user being more user friendly would be what I would improve on.
And I was watching ahead of this interview, an interview actually where NIKS, you spoke to Georgia Taglietti, I think is his name, from She Said So, or formerly from Sonar. And you talked a little bit about how there's some stream platforms actually coming out of Africa, like Boomplay, that are actually really popular there. And I'm just curious, have you guys explored that? Any thoughts or feelings on kind of those other types of platforms and services?
I think at the time I was a lot more tapped in with like what was happening across music platforms. But I think that, yeah, there's been a small rise in like alternatives, which I think is good because it's always good to have alternatives and not just like one monopoly. But yeah, it's something I've definitely like thought about in terms of, what ways could be better provide an experience for like users and listeners and buyers. And I just guess ensuring that we're recentering artists back. Artists are being recentered back on a platform to ensure that they are, able to share their work and benefit from that ultimately.
Yeah. I think sometimes due to kind of like investor pressures and Wall Street and things like that, some of these really big platforms, they tend to center either big record labels or kind of other interests, which kind of sort of changes the dynamic of the experience on there. But I'd love to kind of also just come back to the origin story for a moment. And obviously, if we go back to May, June 2020, what happened to George Floyd and everything, it was a very challenging time. And I think through the good work that you guys have been doing and many other organizations, it does feel like the music industry and music culture has moved forward a little bit. But I'm curious, how have you guys seen it move forward? And do you feel like there's still areas, whether it's kind of who's headlining shows or diversity across kind of, who's getting booked? Are there still areas that you guys feel today need work, and what would those be?
I mean, I would say that there was a small window during that year or the year after where the industry was paying attention to platforms such as ours and was engaging with platforms such as ours. I would say that that window has closed. And I'm not sure if beyond the first year or two, much actual tangible change has really happened, beyond the work that platforms such as us have been doing. And I just want to really highlight that the change has come from platforms of the marginalized people who have been doing the work, not the industry. Yeah, that's kind of my like short and sweet perspective on it. And I think that, you saw platforms such as B.A.D, you saw platforms such as Daytimers, you saw certain voices such as like Elijah and prominent voices come out and become, I guess, a voice of providing just an alternate perspective on things and providing platforms for other entities. I think that's what's changed, is that the industry has allowed a handful of voices or alternative platforms to come through. In terms of the industry as a whole, I think it's the same. I don't think it's changed particularly. I think what me and another member have actually, it's funny, we recently discussed, was that the industry, what it was able to provide space for platforms like ours and voices to kind of speak and do their thing. But I'm not sure it provided the support that it needed to enable sustainable change that such platforms like ours were doing. And there was a post last week by a publication on their Instagram. I need to remember it word for word. I can send you the link afterwards, where it kind of said a lot, but said nothing about the change that's happened in the industry. And I just thought, this is such an interesting way to say so much but say so little, because that's actually very reflective of the industry. So much has happened, but so little impact that's been embedded has changed. So it's kind of like, let's shout about this platform, and then that's kind of it. So what I would say is that platforms like us, who are, one, not profit making, we don't make profit. Most of us work voluntarily. We have to apply for grants to, be sustainable, to enable all the activities that you see we do. But really, what role has the industry played in enabling platforms such as us to become sustainable? I'm not sure what the role is. So so when you go back to like what has happened, the change that's happened is platforms like ours grafting to ensure that we can continue, but the actual industry hasn't changed.
Yeah, I also personally, really, really noticed. It's pretty unfortunate to say, but I personally also do really have the feeling. I live in Berlin right now for over 4 years. I've been DJing kind of the similar time period, and I just realized, like on the 2nd of May, I'm going to play a club here, and it's the first time ever outside of my own programming that I'm playing a full black lineup. And I just realized to myself, like, wow, okay, after 4 years, this is actually happening. I'm personally really excited. But it's pretty. Even when I told my friends last weekend as well, everyone was really surprised. Like, "Wow, you're kidding me, right?" So there's not enough happening as well. Where you do see that a lot of promoters, a lot of clubs are really focusing on equality without even realizing the differences between the artists that they book and the different needs as well. Where the focus should be really shifted more on the equity part and provide the certain tools, provide the certain exposure that the specific artists need. And that's something that's really lacking. Also, when I do see a lot of like collectives, a lot of clubs, it's kind of with the best intention, but it's really this focus on diversity, inclusivity, and equality, where there's no actual knowledge and or education in what it actually means to be inclusive, or what it actually means to be treated equal. So that's something that's that's a little bit frustrating for me as well. I do think that people should acknowledge the differences, because it's not bad to be different to be different as an artist, to be a black artist. But it is important that when working with these type of minorities, that there's a certain understanding of the path they had to take to get at a certain position. And I do understand that, like, as a promoter, as a club, you cannot be fully educated in a specific topic or in every specific type of struggle that minorities go to and or minority artists. But there is a certain investment that needs to be genuine than just writing a certain words to check the boxes when you're doing your marketing. So that's quite like, and it's also like the higher positions in the industry as well. Like a lot of positions are still managed by white straight males, and that's very unfortunate. I do know a few club owners who are actively trying or actively participating in making a change. But this is still, the entire structure is still really whitewashed, and that's also something that should change, and also something that people should realize more to be able to make space for black artists, black bookers, black promoters.
Mm. Do you feel like there's certain pockets, geographically speaking, that are like, for example, would you say that Europe is kind of moving is a bit more kind of aware of these issues than America, or would you say it's kind of a fairly global, like, challenging situation?
It's it's different. I personally can speak a bit more about Europe as I live here, but I must say, when it comes to racism as well, when George Floyd got murdered, a lot of people here in Europe were really scared about like the racist increase in Netherlands, where I'm originally from, Germany, where I mentioned like, hey, in America it's much more out there, it's much more pointed out, where over here in Europe it's much more hidden. So I do. It's for Europe. It's very different. Where I personally do have a feeling, when Amsterdam, they're really putting a bit more effort. But what I personally also noticed is that Amsterdam, Holland in general, when it comes to the club industry, it's much more multicultural. So people are more used to actual black bodies on the dance floor, black people. It's something what I start noticing here in Berlin really bad, that it's Berlin is less multicultural. There are much less black people than I'm personally used when I'm going to a Paris, a London, a Amsterdam. So you also notice that in the programming of the clubs, that it's just less common. I During my panel talk as well last Tuesday, we also discussed the topic of like the more hip hop R&B side industry over here, specifically in Berlin. But in general, is more seen as a black community. But here in Berlin, that bridge between the people who go to those parties and our underground, that bridge, it's just huge. There's like, also I was like talking to certain black owned other businesses, black owned clubs, and we were just discussing, how are we going to close the bridge? How are we going to unify those people as well? So in that way, when it comes to the black community, the black party people, let's say here in Berlin, it has a very, very long way to go. Also, we do in the city, we do have some powerhouses who have a huge influence in the European industry, and it's also, they have a lot of power, but they just keep on running. They keep on running their events the way how they used to, and in the most profitable way as well. Even though, in my personal opinion, with the right balance, you can still keep that certain way of profit that you're making, but also creating a bit more opportunities to certain artists, collectives, etc.
I know it's maybe difficult sometimes to sort of prioritize amongst many different kind of areas and efforts, but I'm curious, like, do you guys feel that, there's a particular area that is worth tackling first, whether it be kind of lineups or education or kind of, funding models or things like that? Do you feel, if you had to kind of think about what makes the biggest impact, what do you feel is kind of the area that would be highest priority to work on?
I would love to see lineups, but I do feel like post like 2020, it was a hype to book black artists, but now it's also decreasing, and it's becoming more and more difficult. So that's why I personally think it's a certain part of acknowledgement, and also a better understanding and educational parts. It's something that I hear in Berlin. I do miss the educational part of the black history in club culture a lot.
Mm,
I do think also, like, ideally I would see more diverse lineups, more preferably more black lineups. But I do feel that's also a step too far in a certain way, or a difficult step. So that's why, to tone it down, I think it's really important to give people, but also people who participate in these type of events, a better understanding of the difficulties certain minorities have, but definitely also clubs, and also bookers. A lot of bookers should be a bit better educated, because it's like
mm,
really uncomfortable for me as a DJ, when I need to reach out to a certain promoter who books me in a lineup with. It was like this happened last week with 10 other artists. It was a weekender, and I was the only black artist line in that lineup. Like, it's not my job to educate others to be more aware of that. So
mm. How about you, Nix? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that, I think that's like, there's so many different elements that could be prioritized.
Mm,
I think there's an educational piece for the industry that really needs to take kind of center in terms of just a mass re-education. And I think to a point that was made earlier in terms of the people in ownership positions, that's kind of a key thing for me, because unless, people from marginalised backgrounds are in the leadership or ownership roles, then the trickle down effect actually isn't really going to happen. But I think yeah, there's a lot of corners that could be tackled, but I think like maybe a mass educational piece would be like first and foremost, and then step by step. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have a sense of kind of what format that kind of educational piece can take? Or is it kind of panels or workshops or just, something else?
I mean, panels and workshops exist now. So no, I don't have a particular idea. I'd probably say it would just be kind of like a reset, like a full-on reset, like revamp. Yeah, what that looks like, I'm not sure, because panels and workshops kind of already exist, and
Yeah.
I think I'm not sure the people that engage with them are the people that engage with them are like normal people who are genuinely very curious about, and like are generally the people who are quite active in small scenes already, and
Yeah.
they are the ones who are already being proactive. A lot of people that a lot of say non-marginalized people who attend panels are people who are already who are trying hard already to be very proactive in small scenes to help make change. They're not the target audience, it's actually other people that should be attending. But yeah,
it's a really interesting question, right? Like, how do you reach the people who aren't listening, the people who are trying not to be educated, or like actively kind of closing their ears? And I don't know the answer to that, but
Yeah, I would personally like to create a bit more awareness through very subtle notes. For example, here in Berlin, a lot of other cities as well, there are a lot of events who collaborate with certain artists to create a certain light projection, or they have actual art in the club. I personally would love to have a bit more awareness for, like, in our preference, obviously, for Black artists. Also during Black History Month, I do see a lot of companies marketing using it in the marketing advantage. But when it comes to a lot of clubs, etc., I do not see anything about it. And I think, like, even if you would have like a small sign of a reminder of Black History Month. I wouldn't say like a sign with a happy Black History Month, because that wouldn't make me very happy. But just a small reminder that make people think, or also communicate or question themselves. Because I do think if you're able to spark a certain curiosity, that's also a pretty powerful tool. I don't know, because personally, when I with my own club night tomorrow, like the majority of the lineup is Black. I even used some native patterns from my own black roots in the artwork. But like, yeah, I'm mostly reaching out to the people who come to my party who know me, who know my culture as well. But I do definitely think that the bigger clubs, or at least the non-Black promoters, collectives, etc., could sparkle a certain curiosity and a bit more focus. And I must say, it also comes with lineups. Like, certain, just having a lineup. I think our lineup, we book Black artists. It stands out mostly. It's recognizable. Like, everyone in the industry who has a bit of knowledge of DJs, let's say, so about music and stuff like that, acknowledge it, sees it. So I would love to see others following that example as well.
Speaking of examples and kind of sharing what's worked and kind of actually inspiring other people, I know, NIKS, you shared the story of how Sherelle was actually inspired by you to set up her label and start something. And I'm just curious, I'd love to hear from you both. You've built this international collective with, over 5,000 artists and creators on the platform. I think you work with a team of a dozen or two dozen people spread across the entire world. And I'm curious, what have you found that's worked well, and what has been more challenging and difficult to overcome when building this collective across many different time zones, many different parts of the world, many different people's backgrounds, in terms of just building, I guess, a team first and foremost, and then a community and collective beyond that?
Yeah, so I'd say we had a fuller team, maybe so from 2020 until maybe 23. We had a fuller team of people more globally. Now the team is about there's about four. There's three of us who are working like in it, and then there's an additional person who supports. So I think the challenge has been that we were able to fully support a fully fledged team of people across like the UK, Europe, part of Africa, and over the years we've just not been able to sustain that because, as I mentioned earlier, we're not a revenue profit generating entity, so we rely on grants, and so that just wasn't sustainable. Like, we came out of a period where people weren't working and had time off and could volunteer and do things for free, but also we were able to receive grants to sustain us to be able to pay people. Like, yeah, as you mentioned, we had about 12 people at any given time, but that doesn't happen, that doesn't exist anymore. Like, grants have been cut, therefore people need to actually find full-time jobs that can sustain them. So I think, going back to my point, we've come out of this window of support and the skies are blue and the sun's out all the time, to like to the kind of reality of people need jobs that can pay and sustain them, and without grants we can't do that. So that was probably the biggest challenge. Was and I'm so grateful for all the people that have worked with us in the past. They've all been so great, and honestly, like, we wouldn't be here without them. But managing that and trying to sustain that, myself and the other co-founder, and something we still talk about today, it's like you just feel really guilty about not being able to provide consistently, and it's like, but that's the reality of it. And if you speak to any collective, any non-profit collective, that is the reality. Unless you are receiving 6-figure grants on an annual basis, you can't support a group of 12 people unless they're willing to volunteer, which I don't expect anyone to do, like over a long period of time. So that was probably the biggest challenge. And then the reality of like, okay, our output then therefore has to reflect that. So having to reduce the output. So as it stands, we've got the database, which just functions as a kind of free and open accessible resource. And we've kind of had to make the decision to reduce a lot of the output and just focus on, as we've mentioned, the kind of events and panels and talks. That's probably been the most difficult, I think, for myself and the other co-founder, is the realization of we're not like other entities, who, we're not a ticket selling platform, we're not a magazine, we're not I don't know. And we had so many people send us suggestions like, why don't you make the website a paid, so you, like a bank, like a wall that people have to then pay for to access? And I was like, I could do that, and then we could generate revenue that way, but that really defeats the whole point of why the resource exists, So it was about like actually weighing up that and making the sacrifice of, okay, we can only really exist in these 2 or 3 outputs, and the rest we'll just have to put on pause. And so I guess just like balancing like those in kind of internal battles of like, what are we doing in terms of like the support and the output versus like being realistic with what we can actually do. Another member of our team has like a full-time job, so trying to balance that with this and things like that. So it has been quite difficult in that regard. And then in terms of, I guess you also asked about, the wider community and stuff. Again, I think there was a real strength in the first 2 or 3 years. And then I think naturally, as we had to dwindle with team members and output, that naturally dwindled as well. But we still, of course, have people that, we work with and that support us. And we always get messages and people wanting to collab with us, etc., etc. But I just think reality hits, and like the truth is like we live in a world and industry that just don't support entities like us enough, and I think that's kind of it. Unless you have a pot of money just sat there that you can pour into a project like this, in terms of being able to pay staff on a full-time basis and to be able to put out the output that we once did have, then yeah, it can't function in that way. So that's definitely been the hardest decision, was like that realization, and then having to come to terms with, okay, we have to choose the output, the select output, and team members to keep on. So yeah.
What was the evolution to start a label side of things? Was that partly in response to kind of looking for an alternative financial model? Or was that kind of...
That was actually just more like a fun thing. So myself and Tanya, who launched the label with me at the time, were receiving like lots of demos from artists. Actually, that's really what it came out from. We used to get sent loads of demos,
Mm-hmm.
and we were like, oh, this is great. And then we just kind of decided like we should start a label, and we've started with compilations as a way to showcase music from different artists from different parts of the world. Compilations are just a great way to showcase lots of music at once. And that was primarily the reason, was to just be able to showcase music from different artists from different parts of the world, different genres, all at once around the kind of May June period, which falls into our birthday.
Yeah. One of the earlier guests on this podcast was a guy named David Zhao, who founded a collective called Eastern Margins. And it's interesting. They had a similar story of starting with compilations of Asian and Southeast Asian music and kind of championing that and bringing that to kind of a new audience in the UK and Europe and the West.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that kind of, it feels like that aspect of kind of curation and highlight and putting in the spotlight is, I guess, kind of, in many ways, I guess that's the kind of core principle of what a label today is about, in terms of, really it's kind of like putting the spotlight on check out these artists. I'm really excited about them. I want to bring them and, get you excited about them.
Yeah, it's a really nice way to showcase, music from different genres, artists from different genres, artists from different regions. And I think recognizing that B.A.D operates in the Western Hemisphere, so UK and Europe, how can we bring in artists who maybe people from this audience in Europe don't know about into this circle? So I know with the first compilation, we had Chimba, who's operating in Kenya, I believe, and we've also worked with artists such as Kamaru, also from Kenya. So yeah, it's a nice way to champion artists from different regions and bring them into new regions. And music. If music's digital, it can be accessed pretty much anywhere by anyone. So it's also a very easy way to circulate music. And it's always just nice to bring different artists together who maybe never would work together or be on the same lineup or be on the same music compilation. So yeah.
On that note, I'm curious, it segues quite nicely to ask, are there any artists or scenes or sounds that each of you are kind of excited about right now that you're listening to and that you love to share?
Oh, yeah, I feel like I'm always listening to different artists. I think actually this is quite a simple answer, but like I'm based in London, and I think there's like at the moment there's like a nice thing happening in the UK, even with like underground artists and underground scenes, where I feel like we're kind of doing a bit of a circle and going back to like just nice simple music. Like there was like some weird what should I say? There was some weird trends with music that kind of also came out of like 2020, but I feel like we're kind of circling back to just good timeless quality music across the board, of like in dance music as well. Like I feel like we're returning back to like BPMs that make sense, and sounds that are just classic and timeless, that like if someone played you in 10 years you'd be like, oh yeah, this still is really relevant. I feel like there's like a shift like in that happening generally, and being in the UK and London, some of the music that I'm being sent and that I'm hearing is just like very refreshing in that way, I feel.
How about you, Joshua?
Well, I'm a house person. I love the more deeper, the more sensual touch of house. And for me, it would say, like, for the past few years, I think I got to know them, or at least their music in 2019, is Muscle Cars, a duo from New York, who's pretty frequently here in Berlin. They've played two of my parties, and their music is just, it's out of this world. They're pretty young, and they're really translating the music where the industry started with, in such an incredible, inspiring way as well. From the way how they curate the radio show at Lot Radio, the way how they created their first album, from the artwork to the artists involved, how they really incorporate their friends as well and their community and the people around them. For me, like, besides loving their music, being obsessed with the music, the way how they lift their community, their friends, the people around them together, is just a beautiful example for anyone. Just to grow together, to move together as well. Like it's just beautiful. Also, when you look at the credits of the album, where you see there are so many unknown artists on the album as well, and people who helped out with the artwork, etc. I think it's for everyone. Yeah, it preferred in an ideal world, let's say so, like everyone working in the industry should really take an example of it. And also for the people who try to start something of their own, like it's a saturated industry, like really, like extremely right now. And a lot of people also ask me for advice that just don't know where to start. And I also tell them, like, yeah, just sit around the table, like have a dinner with your friends who have a like-minded idea, and just see what you can do together at that moment. Like maybe you can start that dinner and just continue inviting a new person every week, and in that way inspire others. I don't know, that's kind of the feeling that I get when listening to muscle cars, when I look how they do everything, that I'm just at their dinner table, like enjoying music.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And shout out to The Lot Radio. So many great shows and radio hosts on The Lot. I'm curious, if somebody's listening to this and they actually would like to send either of you music, what is the easiest way for them to get in touch with you?
Maybe if they hit us up on Instagram, and then we can share an email address for them to send demos to, that'd be good.
Yeah. Joshua, same? Or?
Yeah, the same. Like depends. Yeah, NIKS is in charge of curating the label. But like, yeah, we're always open to listen, especially when it's good. Like, yeah, love to share it. So yeah, I would say like, yeah, a different email addresses, like, or at my personal Instagram or my artist Instagram. I also have an email in the bio, so like DJ Westfa can also reach out on that email, preferably not on Instagram. But so yeah,
sweet. We'll link to both the Instagrams in the show notes, and maybe do a collabo post so people can find that. Cool. Well, I know you mentioned that you've got a compilation coming out this summer. So on the topic of the label and kind of bringing artists together and, you know, putting the spotlight and showcasing, can you tell us a little bit more about what's in the pipeline?
Yeah, so as part of the 5-year celebration, I've been working on our third compilation, I think it is now. So that'll be coming out in the summer. And yeah, I'm really excited because it's a really strong roster of producers and artists who have been producing for a long time in their respective genres and coming from very different genres this time. So we've got quite a broad spectrum of sound, but actually somehow all the tracks that, you know, I've been sent all really kind of work. There's like synergy in them. And so it's been really interesting having producers, particularly from genres that are quite out there, but are really good producers, and send demos that are a bit different actually maybe to what we're used to hearing from them. So yeah, I'm really excited to announce this one. It's really has been like a delight working with the artists. It's been maybe since last summer I started to collect demos from artists in like July, August. So yeah, it'll be like a year to the date by the time it comes out. So that will be coming out in June. And yeah, I'm really excited. This is a great roster. And I think, like, on a personal note, a lot of producers who I've always kind of looked at as like just being great at what they do, their craft.
Are you open to sharing any names, or is it top secret until it comes out?
We'll announce it when it comes out, and then yeah, everyone can see then.
Yeah. Okay. No worries. All good. And I know you also, aligned with the 5-year anniversary, you also have a tour in the works that's coming up soon. Love to hear a little bit more about kind of where that's touching down, what places you're going. I don't know if the lineup's public yet, but what can you tell us about the tour?
Well, we got some announcement this week, because I think this week, last week we announced our summer part, so the first part of the tour, where we're going to Love International with Liv Wu-Tang, NIKS, and Isaac Carter. Today, like just an hour ago, Silver Ace at Glastonbury got announced the lineup as well, so that's where we're going. Our first stop is going to be Unfold next week, so that lineup will be unannounced, Unfold in London, but also like very like an incredible lineup, to say so. But like, yeah, we're going to like most of the major cities, also Amsterdam, and curating very interesting lineups. Also make sure that we incorporate local artists as well. Besides that, I personally really felt like curating a lineup, like, yeah, we can do that. Like nowadays, let's say, so a lot of people are able to do it. So I'm also starting the conversations with specific venues to see how we can actually really have a certain impact. Besides celebrating the 5 year, we do want to do more. We do want to give opportunities. We do want to reach the people more. So with a lot of venues, a lot of locations, in the talks to organize certain personalized workshops, panels, and other activities, because I think it's also very important that you really try to adjust to a certain city, a certain place, to the specific needs of the community there. Where, in my personal opinion, the conversation that I have with a club in the US are very different than I have with the ones in Amsterdam, because there's just there's a different need. So I was also thinking about the fact, like, how can we sustain, how can we keep our impact sustainable and try to keep our impact as long as possible at the cities where we go. So that's why I'm really doing my best to adjust towards the specific needs of the city the best way, and also in a fun way, and also close the bridges for the people who like to start, and also give them an opportunity to listen and or meet their favorite artist. Where nowadays it feels like the being a DJ is very glorified as well, and especially because of social media, it feels very out of reach, even though a lot of artists love to meet the local communities, love to support any ideas and stuff like that. So that's also like a very important part of the tour as well. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to that as well, like connecting with the local creators, the communication people from the specific venues, also to come up with ideas to bring our experience from this side or this specific city to another one. And yeah, also I think that's just so important that we should move together, but also like educate each other, inspire others, and also get inspired by others. So yeah, that's like, yeah, for the first part of the tour, it's already really looking good. The second part is also going to be a lot of fun. Yeah, where we're going to, yeah, touch several capitals of Europe, also going overseas to the US, which is also going to be a very interesting one. So it's going to be a busy and exciting year.
Awesome.
I also
And
wanted to add that the lineup Joshua mentioned a couple of hours ago got announced. You can see it online as well. We've got Anne's, OK Williams, Seb Odyssey, Hutch, myself, and Aletha. But yeah, I just wanted to chuck that in.
nice.
Also,
Yeah, I think there's definitely a generational thing as well. I think I saw some article about how some of these big festivals, the kind of headline acts keep getting older and older and older and older, and they're just kind of like aging. And I think there's a lot of work that could be done to just kind of give the stage to up and coming younger artists and producers and DJs out there. So I think it's good to hear that you guys are kind of supporting that.
Yeah, and I would also love to add where everyone support one another as well, because I do think everything that Nick's mentioned, that I mentioned during this talk as well, that a lot of people do relate, a lot of like party people as well, to create a change or like be a
Yeah, and
part of the change
I'd
as well.
agree with that
Share,
and add to that by saying
support
there's a
your
nice way that you
artists,
can
support your
curate a
friends,
lineup
but
that
also
straddles
support
that
like the
that
collectives, the
you're
parties
able
that
to
you
tick
go
both
to.
boxes,
I
because
live
we
in
totally
Berlin,
understand
like
you need to sell
Berlin,
tickets,
quite
of
a guest
course,
list city,
especially if it's a club
but
night.
like that, also if you think
Um,
about it, like I do know
but there is
everything
a way
gets
that you
more
can balance
expensive,
by
but
having a
wherever you
headliner
can,
with
try to
also like a
support as
local
well.
act.
Also, when
And you
it
can
comes to
make the
buying
lineup
music,
creative, it doesn't
also
have to necessarily
especially for
mean
the
that the local's open and maybe
non-professionals
they're
in
closing the room.
music,
I don't know. Like
Bandcamp
you
is
can be a bit more
accessible
creative with how you're
for
positioning
everyone,
such people.
and it's
And
such
I
an
think to
easy,
the point of
direct
like
way
this
to
gap
support your favorite
whereby
artist.
there's like
Because sometimes it feels
there's no
a
real
little
in
bit like
between.
Bandcamp and
I again
other
think that's a
buying
reflection on
platforms
the
are for
industry,
professionals
because
only, but it's for everyone.
it's
And
we had a
it's
couple of years
it's
where we
just
saw
small
new names
steps, but
coming through,
it
but it's
definitely helps
how does the
and makes a
industry
huge impact.
nurture and
Could make a huge
sustain these
impact.
people? And I think the industry has a lot to answer for so many things in lacking in being able to sustain and nurture entities or individuals or people or newcomers or new DJs. And it's something that like as a whole we need to do better at. And it's something I was talking to the other day with another DJ about, you know, we're 5 years on from a lot of change, but like how much of this change is still present today? And one of that is a lot of new DJs came out of 2020, but how many of them today have grown into being, after 5 years, now the next tier of being a DJ? And I don't think there's that many that we can say. So that we still have this gap between the names and people, and rightfully so. Like, and this is not any shade on the people who've earned the decades of like graft in the industry, who a lot of us look up to. But it's just now, how do we create that middle tier so that there's not just this gap between opener or local to headliner? It's like, how does the industry nurture a middle tier to just balance that out?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think, I think a lot of it is about like supporting and educating those openers and local people to kind of rise up and get into that kind of the next level of, the middle tier. But I don't think there's necessarily any easy answer to it. It's, education, time, sharing those lineups and sharing those slots essentially at the end of the day. Just real quickly on the tour, if somebody wanted to check if it was coming to their city, I know your website is blackartistdatabase.co. Is that the best place to look, or on your Instagram page, or where can people find out when the kind of dates and cities get announced? Yeah. Awesome. Sweet. One last question for me before we wrap up. It's kind of more of a philosophical one, but the theme of this podcast, the Inside Track, is about kind of trying to give people across the music culture spectrum a little bit of an inside view, a little bit of kind of maybe some tips and advice, especially those younger generations. And so I'm just curious to hear from both of you. If you had a time machine and you could go back and visit, your teenage self, what kind of words of advice would you say to yourselves or others?
Answered
You
it
can
as well.
answer from this. Yeah, I love that. How about you, NIKS?
That's a nice one. I quite enjoyed like my teenage years of like when I was going out and stuff. I'd probably say that doing what I do now in terms of like DJing and producing, I would probably say to myself that to just take a punt on myself earlier. I always do wish I started like just doing like production and DJing earlier. And I think I didn't because I was enjoying, going out and enjoying music and enjoying good DJs and enjoying like good DJs playing, discovering music in clubs and festivals. But I always like in my head wanted to start, particularly with production. I'd probably just say like, just start doing it. Just if you have a desire to start something, just start it. Like you don't have to be good at it. Just start. Because you get better as you do things more and more and more. And that's something I'm also still telling myself, like, just do it. Quite simply, just do it. Like, if you have a desire to start learning to DJ or to produce or to start a night or a label, or just do it. Like, literally just do it. Speak with your friends, speak with people that are doing it to get advice from. People will support you, like your peers will support you. If you've got a group of people, they'll support you. If you've got older people, for me, I've always looked up to artists or DJs that are like 10 years older than me and as a good examples, and like it's always been reaching out to them and getting advice that's been a key driver in inspiring me to do things. So it's just like, just do it. That's always what I'd say.
Yeah, everybody starts somewhere, right?
Right. Yeah.
Like take that first step, take the leap.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Sweet. Well, thank you both so much for speaking to me today and joining the podcast. Any final shout outs or any links? Or obviously we talked about the website, blackartistdatabase.co. Any other links, Instagram, or any other shout outs that you guys want to do before wrapping up?
I guess, as we mentioned, the Instagram is where we're going to have a lot of the assets with the information for the tour. And just shout out to everyone that's been like on the journey, to the team, to all the kind of venues that we've been working with, the artists that we work with time and time again. I'm personally like very excited for this summer, and I think Jazura is as well. So like we'd love to just see as many people come through. We'll be in London, Amsterdam, LA, Glastonbury, Tisno, come through.
Awesome. Yeah, it makes me think of the saying, be the change that you want to see. So thank you both for joining today. I really appreciate you spending the time with us, and we'll see you next time. Take care.
Thanks for having us.